No. No, I don't think I will.
So recently I released a video on Hollow Knight Silksong, and look, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. I was fairly harsh on the game, all things considered. It was definitely a very critical video, but to give you the TLDR or TLDW, I came to the conclusion that the game was overall of a high quality and also pretty good, but that I also could not recommend it, due to my believing that the game was overly punishing and needlessly tedious, in a way that wasn't that fun. And that's where the problem lies, that I didn't find Hollow Knight Silksong fun, because God forbid someone not finding grinding for resources or unreasonably long runbacks to be fun. And even now, as I sit here and point out the absurdity of the inability to see how these elements might just not provide an enjoyable play experience, even if you do personally enjoy them yourself, there's a not so small percentage of players that can't seem to wrap their minds around this, as would be indicated by the sheer number of dislikes on that video. Now look, I'm not gonna sit here and pretend like every single argument I made in that video was 100% foolproof, or that you can't disagree with some of the things I said, but to dismiss every point I raised as a mere lack of skill, even if it is applicable in some cases, is just disingenuous, and reveals a deeper innate desire to shield Silksong from any untoward criticism, which is pretty par for the course considering we live in a now post-Souls era, where any and all discussions surrounding difficulty are now viewed as taboo. But I haven't exactly strayed away from covering controversial gaming opinions so far, and I certainly don't plan on stopping anytime soon either. So I'm instead going to use this as an opportunity to respond to some of the comments that I received, and to see if there's at least some value that can be extracted. And I realistically don't expect to change too many people's minds, but I also figure it can't hurt to try either. Who knows, maybe we'll all end up leaving with newfound perspectives. Here's one roided out cat's meager attempt at normalizing the topic of difficulty. Now, if you can actually believe it, not every comment on my last video was just some variation of get good, skill issue, or some other ad hominem. Some of the comments even responded to some of the things that I had to say in the video. Now, some of these comments took two very different approaches. Some of these comments argued in good faith, and the other ones, not so much. But we'll start off with the good faith comments first. So apparently, I got off on the wrong foot with this commenter as early as the intro to the video. Let's see what they had to say. I kinda don't get the opening of the video. I thought the author does not agree with the whole casualization trend. Hell, Neo is supposed to be hard. It's a Team Ninja game. Neo 2 Endgame is really difficult and requires a lot of skill or cheese. Not even getting into the video content, but the opening itself already has me baffled, and I fully agree with the author's take on Wilds. Well, the clip that I included about Neo, specifically about the demo, is of me praising the game for maintaining its hardcore challenge, and being thankful that they didn't dumb it down. So I'm not exactly sure what the commenter's issue is with this clip in particular, but putting that aside, the point of the intro is that I'm basically just poking fun at myself, because yeah, I've complained about games being dumbed down or oversimplified in the past. But yet here with Silksong, I find myself complaining about the opposite. That's why I included the monkey's paw curling in between the clips. I guess this intro was just my own way of trying to be self-aware. But I suppose my admittedly poor editing skills may have not done the best job of conveying that. Our next comment reads, "This has not been true for a good while. They were nerfed pretty early on in the first few patches, made Sister Splinter really easy. She just feels way less aggressive." And this would be in reference to the ads dealing double damage during this fight. And according to this commenter, this is apparently no longer the case. Now, I can't really confirm or deny this because I fought her during the vanilla release of the game. And the patch notes just say that they've slightly reduced the difficulty of the fight itself, and doesn't really specify the mobs themselves, which are apparently called Splinter Bark according to the wiki. So I'll just have to take their word for it. And then we have another comment in reference to Sister Splinter, and this is specifically about her vines. "Just use Silk Spear. It can hit like half the arena at once and destroys the vines instantly. I don't know why anyone tries to use their needle to get rid of them. Well, I can give you one good reason: to conserve your silk bar, so you have a heal ready for whenever you take damage. I'm assuming you know healing consumes an entire thread of silk, and the silk spear also consumes part of that thread. So yeah, the silk spear may be efficient for clearing out vines, but you're also sacrificing a potential heal. And with Sister Splinter being one of the tougher fights in the game, well, pre-patch anyway, having an extra heal ready is definitely not gonna hurt. Dev issue. I agree. A couple of points you make in this video are valid, and then you pull out a take like, female characters existing is bad because I can't goon to them. Now, to be fair, I did establish that Lace is at the very least goon material.
I'm gonna come.
BTW, there's triple damage for certain bosses like Lost Lace or Grandmother Silk with a specific attack. Yeah, I mean, this is definitely fair, but in my defense, when I said that the enemies in the early game do just as much damage as the enemies in the end game, I was specifically referring to the end of Act 2. I think I even had some footage from Act 2 when I was talking about this. I mean, maybe the lingo has changed over the years, but I don't exactly remember anyone referring to the Sevi Islands in Pokemon Fire Red or Leaf Green as endgame content. The endgame in those games were the Elite Four and the Pokemon League, and the Sevi Islands were considered post-game content. Lost Lace is an Act 3 optional boss, and is something that a lot of players will probably just straight up miss. Sorry, I'm not trying to pull a actually here, but I think it's fairly evident that Lost Lace is post-game content, and decidedly separate from the endgame. But Grandmother Silk is of course the final boss of Act 2, and she does actually have an attack that does triple damage. So don't worry, I'm not weaseling my way out of this one. So you might be wondering, how exactly did I miss this? Well, I had initially thought that I simply just didn't get hit with the move, but taking a look back at my own footage, and yeah, I very much did get hit with this move, so I don't know what happened. I guess I just wasn't really paying attention to my health, and simply assumed that it only did 2 masks. So yeah, I guess Team Cherry does in fact introduce triple mask damage. Now, does this change my opinion on double damage in this game? No, not really. Just because a couple of late game bosses have 1 or 2 moves that do triple damage doesn't really change much in the grand scheme of things. I still believe that double mask damage is far too common in the early game, and 1 or 2 late game bosses doing triple damage doesn't really change that. Alright, so I think we'll read one more charitable comment and then we'll go ahead and switch gears. I personally found the game to be far too easy. I first tried like 75% of the bosses in the game, though I acknowledge that earlier bosses do seem to be tougher. When it comes to exploration, I miraculously had 100% completion at the end of Act 3. Alright, and that's about it for the charitable comments. Let's go ahead and move on over to the not-so-charitable ones. Alright, so first up on our naughty list. This whole video feels less like a review and more like an elaborate preemptive defense against the skill issue accusations. Feels like he finished the game out of pure spite, just so he could critique the tedium while saying it's actually a good game. So obviously the issue with this comment is that they're assuming bad faith on my end. Basically, they're implying that I'm lying when I say that Silksong is a good game, which on the surface isn't totally unreasonable considering my video was pretty negative, but I also made it pretty clear that I was mostly going to be focusing on the negatives in that video, so if you were expecting me to glaze the game after that, then that's kind of on you. And even with that disclaimer, I still managed to dedicate an entire section of my video saying how good some of the boss fights were. I mean, if I really hated the game as much as you apparently think I do, why would I bother praising any aspects of the game at all? It just doesn't really make sense. And the reason why I stuck with Silksong and pushed through until the end is because I desperately wanted to like the game. I wanted to give it a fair shake. The original Hollow Knight is one of my favorite video games ever. And I wanted to be able to say the same thing about Silksong, but no matter how hard I tried, I just struggled to find the fun in some of Silksong's more tedious aspects, and these aspects really just drag the game down as a whole, even if I do enjoy quite a bit else about the game. Alright, so let's move on to the next comment that I have a bit of a problem with. Hollow Knight literally has enemies that deal double damage in Forgotten Crossroads, and you can encounter them in the first 15 minutes of the playthrough. Enemies? Enemies as in plural? Not the singular mini-boss that you cherry-picked for the sake of your argument? And if you're unfamiliar with the enemy that he's referring to, it is the Husk Guard found in the Forgotten Crossroads. He is a singular lone enemy found in the beginning of the game that is unusually tanky, deals double damage, and that you're basically not even supposed to fight. There are conveniently placed platforms to the right of him, so you can very easily ignore the fight altogether, and come back to it later when you're better equipped. And it's not even like every attack from this enemy even does double damage. It's only if you get hit by his club. His shockwaves only do 1 mask, and contact damage also only does 1 mask. And how do I know that he's a mini-boss, do you ask? Because he takes 14 hits to defeat without an upgraded nail. 14! The rest of the enemies in this area only take 2 to 3 hits at most. And again, you're not even necessarily supposed to fight this enemy. He's kind of like the Tree Sentinel from Elden Ring. Sure, you can fight him, but you're not exactly supposed to either. And he's comparing this mini-boss to basic enemies in Silksong that deal double damage. That's like saying the Tree Sentinel from Elden Ring is the same thing as a Torch Hollow from Dark Souls 1. Silksong has a better economy. Most expensive items cost about 1,000 rosaries. Meanwhile, Hollow Knight has items for 15k geo each. Again, this is more cherry picking. Hollow Knight has one item that costs 15,000 geo, and that would be the Unbreakable Strength charm. And while equipped, this charm increases your overall damage by 50%. That is a humongous damage boost. This charm is absolutely worth 15,000 geo. Silksong doesn't have anything close to being like that. The closest thing that Silksong has is the Barbed Bracelet. And this charm, or tool rather, only increases your attack by 25%. And it comes with the caveat that you now receive double damage. So all of those attacks that do double damage, guess what? They all do 4 masks now.
Now that's a lot of damage!
You're taking an extreme example and acting like it's somehow the norm. While not everything, there are a lot of items in Silksong that cost more than they do in the original Hollow Knight. A good example of this are the mask shards that can be purchased in both of the game's opening areas. The mask shard that you can buy from the shop located in Dirtmouth only costs 150 geo. This exact same item in Silksong costs 300 rosaries. That's literally double the amount. And on the off chance that this person comments on this video too and accuses me of cherry picking, at least I gave an equivalent example and didn't cherry pick the literal most expensive item. And can you believe we're still not even through this comment? Well, let's keep going.
It's not looking good.
I never had to grind in Silksong, which I can't say about Hollow Knight. The trap/broken benches can be easily fixed by going into a secret room nearby. Secret, you say, so you admit that it can very easily be missed, and end up losing quite a bit of progress in the process, all because of a stupid, silly little gag that is included for the sole purpose of creating a funny streamer moment, and everyone else has to suffer. Well, I wasn't expecting to agree with much of anything from this comment, but I'm glad we were able to find some common ground at least towards the end. So this next comment is actually in response to someone else, but it's not super relevant to what I want to talk about, so we're just going to address Augustus Mute here instead. Their comment reads, "That section also made me check out, because he says that the gauntlet is too hard for something that has 0 reward, as if it isn't blocking an entire quest item in the second act. Yes, it's a late game gauntlet. What do you want? A cookie? An upgrade?" I mean, this comment hurts. I have to ask, did you play the original Hollow Knight? Because the way that you're talking makes it sound like you don't know about the Colosseum of Fools in the original Hollow Knight. It was an optional coliseum where you had to fight through waves of enemies, and if you successfully completed these trials, they had significant rewards, like a notch upgrade and a pale ore, like I said in my video, during this very section where I complain about the High Hall's Gauntlet. I mean, how did you miss this? Clearly you watched my video, and you also must have watched most of it because I don't complain about the High Hall's Gauntlet until closer towards the end. This comment is just kind of weird to me. Also, do you know what genre of game Silksong is? It is a Metroidvania, a genre of games that is built upon meaningful progression, something that Silksong desperately lacks. I mean, you can't even upgrade your needle until the end of Act 1. That's like more than halfway through the game. Actually, there's a quote that I would like to read from the game's director, R.A. Gibson. The quote reads, "The important thing for us is that we allow you to go way off the path. So one player may choose to follow it directly to its conclusion, and then the other may choose to constantly divert from it and find all of the other things that are waiting, and find all the other ways and routes." The quote continues, "Silksong has some moments of steep difficulty, but part of allowing a higher level of freedom within the world means that you have choices all the time about where you're going and what you're doing. Players have ways to mitigate the difficulty via exploration or learning or even circumventing the challenge entirely, rather than getting stonewalled." End quote. So clearly on some level, Team Cherry understands what makes a good Metroidvania tick, but in terms of actual execution, I think they kind of dropped the ball here. You are rarely rewarded for going off the beaten path in Silksong, and if you do, it's 1/4 of a mask shard or 1/8 of an extra hit point, because of how common double damage is. Look, I know it's not a popular position to question our deities over at Team Cherry, but Silksong has one of the worst progression systems I've ever seen in a Metroidvania. And I've played a metric fuck ton of these games, and Silksong takes the cake. Alright, I think we'll read one more comment and then we'll call it quits. "Everything doesn't do 2 mask damage, so if you started with 3 and took 1 mask of damage from everything, the game would be much harder. I know numbers are hard, but 5 masks with sometimes taking double damage is still more health. I'm just getting tired of the double damage arguments. Well, I may not be a mathematician, but I know that 4 mask shards is still fewer than 8. Which, at the start of the game, is the amount of mask shards that you need in order to gain an additional hit point against enemies that deal double damage, which was the entire point of this argument that I raised, that apparently went clean over your head, even after I went into the comments and tried to explain it further, where he just continued to insult me. This guy definitely came from r/gaming circle jerk. Also, he kind of just conveniently ignored the other half of my argument, where I said keep the damage as is, but have you start off with 6 masks instead. That way it would still only require 4 mask shards to get to 4 hit points against double damage enemies. Either way, requiring 8 mask shards to get to 4 hit points against certain enemies is just overkill. That was my point. But this kind of just ties back into my whole point of Silksong lacking in the way of meaningful rewards. Something that we're apparently just not going to see eye to eye on. But I guess this is as good a spot as any to call it. As much as I'd love to keep reading comments, I think I've reached a bit of an impasse with this game's fans, and to an extent, the cult of difficulty as a whole. Which brings me to the thesis of this video. The cult of difficulty has killed any and all nuance in gaming discourse, snuffed it out like a heat-seeking missile, and we're all the worse for it, because if you can actually believe it, once upon a time, you could openly and freely discuss a game's difficulty without fear of being mocked and ridiculed by a horde of mindless drones. Mindless drones that seemingly have no will of their own. It's as if they're all connected to one singular hive mind, as they blindly stumble over themselves to repeat the same tired phrases. Get good, skill issue, all in defense of their Lord Supreme, their chosen developer that they've sworn their allegiance to, and have made it their entire personality to go on war on their behalf. It's this cult-like mentality that has closed off any meaningful discussion to be had, and it bears repeating, but it didn't used to always be like this. You used to be able to criticize a game for its difficulty, whether it was fun or fair or cheap or not cheap. It didn't really matter. I know it might be kind of hard to imagine now that we live in a post-Souls era, but difficulty was just one component of a game, just like gameplay or graphics or any other. It wasn't this sacred thing that you couldn't criticize. I mean, imagine if Sonic 06 came out today. People would unironically defend those god-awful Mach speed sections. They'd probably say skill issue for calling them dog shit, even though that's what they are.
Is Sonic the Hedgehog, or more commonly referred to as Sonic 06, really as bad as people say it is? Now, almost 20 years later, I can confidently say that everyone who didn't like the game, well, pure and simple, they were just not good at playing it. It's one of, if not the best Sonic game ever made, but people couldn't adapt to the sudden difficulty curve the game has. To make the best comparison I can, it's the Dark Souls 2 of 3D Sonic games.
Oh no!
Now, nothing in Silksong is even remotely that bad. Don't get it twisted. I'm just using an extreme example to make my point. We should be able to criticize developers when they go too far or if they slip up. And I don't even know what it is about difficulty in particular that makes it such a contentious topic to so many, because you also get people equally as riled up on the other end, where they demand easy modes and everything, and accuse developers of gatekeeping for not adding it, where I don't sign off on that either. I don't want Silksong to have an easy mode. I just want it to be better balanced, and for it to cut back on at least some of the tedium. I don't think Silksong is such a shitty game that making the rosaries slightly more plentiful, or adding a few more benches between bosses, would somehow just completely ruin it. If anything, it would make it better. It would actually make it far more likely for many players to get good. I mean, that's what you guys want, right? You want us all to get good. Then you should be in favor of design that encourages that, because a lot of the systems in Silksong actively get in the way of you doing that. Because putting an unnecessary platforming gauntlet between you and the boss just artificially extends the process of learning that fight. And I've already seen the cope that the runbacks make you get good at the platforming, but in theory, the level design should be good enough to make you sufficient at the platforming on its own. If you have to force players to replay through the same sections over and over again just to understand the mechanics, then that's just bad design. Good games have you learn and move along at a brisk pace, and don't constantly stonewall you. If players are dropping your game because of the runbacks and not because of the actual bosses, then somewhere you fucked up. This cult of difficulty is just another form of toxic positivity. Nothing should be above criticism, not even our favorite games, especially not them. We should hold both video games and developers to a higher standard. If critiquing a product that you spent your own hard-earned money on somehow makes you entitled, then I guess just don't complain about any video game again ever. Don't complain about Assassin's Creed or Ubisoft. Don't complain about the new Pokemon game. Don't complain about that annoying millennial character in Metroid Prime 4.
So, win?
Sounds pretty entitled to me, but I think I'll probably get off my soapbox now. I've said pretty much everything I needed to say. I don't know if the comments will be any better or not on this video, but for some reason I sort of doubt it. But I don't want to end this video on a negative note, so I will actually extend an olive branch to the Silksong community. Though, not the cult of difficulty, mind you. They're sort of a lost lot. But rather to the rational fans of Silksong. The ones that both love and appreciate the game, but can also recognize that it may be tedious in some areas, even if said tedium didn't bother them nearly as much. And to those fans, I would like to say that despite me not really liking Silksong, I'm at the very least glad that Team Cherry made the game that they wanted to make, even if it doesn't necessarily appeal to me. Too often do we see franchises twist and bend themselves into something that they're not, and all in an attempt to appeal to as wide a demographic as humanly possible, even if that means losing its original charm that made people like it in the first place. For as much as I may have to criticize about Silksong, I could never criticize it for not having soul. something that a lot of modern video games seem to desperately lack. You can always tell when a developer cares about the game that they're making, and it's fairly obvious that Team Cherry cared a great deal about Silksong, maybe even a little too much considering how long it was in the oven. In many ways, Silksong feels somewhat over-designed in areas, but regardless, the effort is clearly still there. But as a fan of the original Hollow Knight, I just wish that the game that Team Cherry wanted to make was also for me.